Hello and welcome to another episode of the Medic Side Hustles podcast. I'm your host, Shubhendu Kulshreshtha, an executive coach and an emergency physician, helping clinicians like you make medicine your side hustle. This is unfortunately the last episode of the first season, but also definitely for sure the last episode of the Medic Side Hustles podcast. And I will tell you what's coming next. I will tell you where we're heading to towards the end of this. But I want to take a couple of minutes today just to go through some of my favorite episodes, or perhaps a little bit about the favorite bits of every episode. And I want to talk about my journey of creating this podcast, how it all started in the first place, how I got around to doing this, and the amazing opportunities it's unlocked for me as I've done this over the last 6 months. And for those of you who don't know, this podcast started, I want to say in Jan or Feb um, of this year. So the first episode's on the 29th of January of 2025. And we are now 19 episodes in. You're listening to the 19th episode, probably the 21st episode, because there's a couple of bonus and solo episodes in there as well. But officially, the full episodes we've done, this is episode 19. So over 6 months. And that's, I don't know, what's the math on that? 180 days, 18 episodes, an episode every 10 days or so. And I want to talk to you about how I made that happen, how I could be consistent through that, and the growth I've seen, because this is my first ever podcast, first time creating something like this and being consistent enough to stick with it. Unlike my YouTube channel, by the way, these go on my YouTube channel as well. So you can listen to this podcast on YouTube, also find it on Peer. So peer.io, if you haven't checked it out, is a website purely for healthcare professionals. And you can find my podcast on all other platforms, major platforms like Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, and Spotify as well. So yeah, basically, I've said this story before, and a massive, huge thanks to Stuart for bringing this to life, really, because Stuart, by the way, Stuart is co-founder of moneytree.co.uk, an online marketplace for doctors. And he was on this podcast as episode 3. But before any of this ever began, Stuart and I were having just a networking call, because we're both in emergency medicine, and he was doing something entrepreneurial, and as was I. And I love connecting with people that I meet via LinkedIn. And we were having this conversation, and he said one of the things that helped him start Moneytree was constantly listening to a podcast during his work commute. And this podcast, which was USA based, and talked about how people started their business, started their companies and their services and their startups, and the challenges they faced and how they overcame those. And he said, it'd be really cool to have something very similar in the UK that's specific to doctors. And at this point, I was doing another podcast called Chai for Change, which probably had like 3 episodes in there. But I was really looking for something that served my clients, that served my coaches, that served my audience, and served people that were looking to make an impact beyond the world of medicine. And when Stuart suggested this, it just started to very quickly click together. I said, okay, it's a great way for me to associate myself with the people that I want to work with. It's a great way for me to showcase those who have done amazing things. And it's a really good way for them, good platform for them to come onto, so that they can get the reach that they've been looking for and showcase what their business is all about. And so it seemed like a win-win-win all around. And it's not very often that kind of happens. And it was just a weird moment when I said, okay, I really got to do this. Like, the win-win-win is something so important that it's got to come to life. So I said, okay, we're good. We'll think about this. And I sat on the idea for a couple of days. And at this point, I was doing Instagram and Twitter and Threads and all this other sort of social media to try and find my ideal audience. And I had already decided that this year in 2025, I was going to cut down and I was going to focus solely on LinkedIn. So that was the constraint I introduced for myself. I said, if I'm going to do this well, if I'm going to do this properly, I've got to do one thing, and I've got to do it well. And that one thing for me was going to be LinkedIn. And yeah, that's when it kind of began. The idea that if I am doing a podcast, how do I do it integrated on LinkedIn? And that's when it kind of hit me that the only way I would do it is if I did it live on LinkedIn. So each of these episodes, almost each of these episodes, have been live episodes streamed on LinkedIn, which got recorded, cleaned up, put on Spotify and YouTube. And that was a complete game changer. First of all, the editing time was next to nothing. So now where I am in like the workflow side of things, 90 minutes start to finish. So 60 minutes of the podcast episode plus about 30 minutes of finishing it up with the help of AI, doing smart editing, creating my show notes, creating a summary document, and uploading it onto the various platforms. 90 minutes is all it takes. And that really enables me to do things a lot faster. The second biggest thing that happened was because it's live, people have already said what they had to say in front of a live audience in public. So there isn't much to do a second take on. There isn't much to kind of edit away or cut or hide. There's a little bit of cleaning up, but the AI does that. It does all of the removing of the ums and ahs. I don't know if you would even hear that because the ums and ahs from this are going to be edited, but the filler words get deleted, and it's a magical moment because they come off, and I've started off sending them some of the drafts of the podcast saying, hey, are you happy with it? And pretty much everyone says, yeah, I've said what I wanted to say on the live podcast. So that makes it super easy. It also does a magical thing for your algorithm on LinkedIn because most of my views for the podcast, even now, 6 months down the line, most of my views for the podcast come from LinkedIn. So on LinkedIn, every episode gets watched by about 1,000 to 2,000 people. Whereas if I go to my podcast creators, creator.spotify.com is where I make my podcast. And I'm looking at analytics right now in front of us. I don't have a lot of followers and I don't have download numbers. But essentially, if I go to all time, then I have 48 followers at the moment. And I've got 418 plays across all of the episodes. And that's 72 hours of consumption. So clearly a huge difference between LinkedIn and Spotify in terms of where my podcast is being consumed. But also, when there's about 1,000 to 2,000 people watching my podcast, they're spending a lot of time on my content. That really boosts my content for other people to get access to. It's um, been really good for my text and my articles that I put on LinkedIn get more views because of the large number of views that my podcast get. The one of the biggest things that I probably should have led with was the fact that it makes it super easy to have conversations with people and say to them, "Hey, I'd love to ask you a few questions. I have a podcast. Would you like to be on my podcast?" Because for me, it opens the doors to having conversations with people that I wouldn't otherwise have had, and for them, it's a really good investment of their time. And on the back of that, they benefit off of my network. And I can say that now with about 5,000 followers on LinkedIn. But for majority of my growth, I was benefiting from their followers. There's a degree of trust that comes about with association with really well established in the field. And that kind of trust was transferring over to me. Like very recently, I've joined doctor's training as a senior facilitator, and founded by Simon Fraser. By the way, it's going to be on the next season, so there's a little sneak peek for you in terms of what's coming next. But yeah, Simon Fraser, and literally somebody messaged me on LinkedIn saying, I really trust Simon Fraser. He has really good choice. You must be really great to be part of his team. So there's a lot of association that happens when you're thinking about sort of mass psychology of people that are listening to you, because at the end of the day, it's not a mass, it's an individual, and that individual makes associations with the things that you get paired with, which essentially is branding, right? So that's kind of a huge part of what played into personal branding for me in the last 6 months. What else has happened as a result of being on the podcast? I mean, I've been invited to podcasts in return, so I've been able to go on people's podcasts and then invite them onto my podcasts. Hannah Brew is an example of one of them, and it's been an absolutely amazing journey. My guests were, oh yeah, the other thing that really happened was when this idea came to my mind, the first thing I did was say, okay, I'll do this if I can do it live on LinkedIn. And then I'll do it if I can get like 15 people to be my guests. And I wasn't expecting anyone to reply, but I reached out to people. And instead of 15, I had like 24 guests that were ready to do it live on LinkedIn. And I said, oh, wow, this really has legs. So immediate ideation to proof of concept, buy-in. And then I was like, okay, we just got to do this. So, of course, the initial few had a little bit of hiccups. It had me figuring out what software to use. It had me figuring out, like, okay, how do I do the introductions while still maintaining the conversation? And then I stepped that up and I did an intro and an outro. Then I stepped it up and I added music, which my good friend Akash Vijayan, Dr. Akash Vijayan's made for this podcast. And then I started to introduce ads. And these were not paid ads, but I gave prior guests an opportunity to advertise in a future episode. And all of this really was a playing ground for me. Every thumbnail that I made, every title slide that I made for the podcast was an opportunity for me to give space to a sponsor. Every advertisement I tried was a trial for a future ad space, and or at least that's how I was looking at it, right? So through the various episodes, I've learned to get better at it. And you might have noticed in my early episodes, I was reading off of a screen on the side because I couldn't think and do the technical aspect of the podcast and speak to the guest and look at the comments that are coming through on LinkedIn because it's happening live all at the same time. So I said, okay, what's the one thing I can offload is scripting the introduction. And I didn't care at this point about reading it out because eventually the quality of what I was delivering mattered more than whether or not I was reading it off a screen or not. The perception of that looking bad was largely in my own head, and for the audience, I'm pretty sure it didn't matter as much. I mean, tell me in the comments if it mattered to you or not that I was reading off a screen. Those were my words. I wrote them, but the fact was that I was delivering something valuable to you. And today, after having done it so many times, I don't even have to bother memorizing it because I've said it so many times. I know exactly how to introduce myself and my guests. I've also, of course, become a lot more comfortable with the camera, which has had an upgrade, I think, mid-season. But I'm also more comfortable with the mic, and all of this is something that comes with practice. And if I had waited to perfect this before getting started, I would never have gotten there because so many of these things only happen once you start to take action, start to do things. What else have I not done? I've not optimized for a lot of things. I've optimized solely for execution. I've optimized solely for making sure that I do it within my constraints, which means within the time limits that I have, within the framework of my key focus being on LinkedIn. So I've not bothered much with what my background looks like. I don't have fancy lighting up there. I just have a simple lamp in the corner, which probably you can't even see in most of my episodes. I've not been scripting most of these, as most of them are conversations, and the one-on-ones or the solo episodes like this one are also unscripted. And the idea is to optimize solely for execution and just getting it done, getting it out there, having and then looking back and reviewing and saying, okay, what are the skills I learned? What worked well? What do I need to tweak? And what do I need to do better? Which is what I want to be talking about next in a minute. I didn't optimize for views. I didn't optimize for comments. I didn't optimize for the value people got out of these episodes as well. It was only towards the end I realized that, hey, I can have a set format. I can have a particular format or a framework around which the conversation takes place so that the audience knows exactly what to expect when they come in to listen to an episode. So all of these things I didn't do, and those are the kind of things that often will keep you stuck from starting. You might want to be perfecting each of those bits, or at least figuring it out to a level where you're comfortable before you start. Whereas I said, no, all I want to do is execute. I just want to get season 1 out there, and then we'll see how it goes. And what happens is that most of the things that you thought you had to worry about don't matter. And then the things that do matter, you never even thought about worrying about them. And lastly, there's all of these other things that you learn and stuff that gets taken care of as you just go along. So if you've been waiting for a signal to start doing something, this is it. Just start. Just get out there, get a proof of concept, get some buy-in, and if you have it, you've got to give it a go. Just start, right? So with that, somehow I've managed to do 6 months of a podcast episode every 10 days and gotten to the end of season 1 of the Medic Side Hustles podcast. So what did work well? What worked well was doing it live on LinkedIn, that was fantastic. What worked well was the conversational tone of it. What worked well was the way I had advertisements and feedback collected from my guests. What worked well was the reach it had on LinkedIn and people that could reach out to me. What worked well was the association and the branding element for me and my business as well as for others. What didn't work so well is probably the engagement. I would have liked a bit more engagement, a few more questions from the audience. What didn't work well was probably the performance on YouTube and Spotify. I mean, they're larger platforms and they're different platforms. So that's a bigger game to play. What didn't work well was making money off the top of this. I mean, I wasn't trying to, but clearly there's many ways in which I can do that. What didn't work well was perhaps the shorts that I was editing weren't as punchy, and there's huge value in putting out shorts that then link people back to the larger podcast. So all of these things are stuff that I can do, but will take more of my time, and I have to figure out which one is worth the effort and which one's worth most of my time to figure out and perfect and get done and get out there. Or even if I drop the perfection bit, which ones can I start doing with minimal effort and maximum output? So, the other thing that really worked well was alongside this podcast, I was also running the first cohort of the Clinician Impact Actionship. And these were clinicians who resonated with me, the work that I do, and the kind of things that I talk about. And so I created a group program where we all came together and tackled a new topic every Monday, had an open discussion every Wednesday, and got them moving from an idea to starting to take action. And when I started this, just like medic side hustles and the idea of making medicine your side hustle, I didn't know what it was that people wanted to do outside of that time. So, fine, you've scaled down your clinical work, medicine is now a side hustle, but what are you doing on the other side? In my mind, it was a combination of leadership, quality improvement, research, entrepreneurship, right? All of that was the possibilities. But through the podcast, through the people that resonated, through the guests that I've had on, as well as the people that have kind of self-selected into the impact action ship and have been some of my star clients in terms of taking action and making progress and getting 10,000 impressions on their LinkedIn post in a week, getting their first client in 6 weeks, getting their interesting cross section of their experience and interests and passions into something that can be sellable. What I've come to realize is that it's not just people who want to make medicine their side hustle, it's clinicians who want to become founders. And they don't want to just be businessmen or women, they don't just want to be entrepreneurs, they want to be founders. They want to lead something meaningful, they want to lead a mission, and they want the mission to give them the life that they deserve, but they also want to use this as a way to fulfill their life's potential, what they've really come to the world for, what they really care about. And so they're really mission driven, they're really out here to make a change in the world, and they're here to found something new. And so with that, the people I serve has really turned out to be clinician founders. It's turned out to be people who are making a difference in the world and using their clinical exposure and experience to make the most of their skill set. And with that, what's going to happen is that the Medic Side Hustles podcast is going to stop, but the Clinician Founders podcast is going to start. That's going to be season 2 onwards. It's going to be called the Clinician Founders podcast. And I haven't found another podcast like this. So if you know of one, let me know. But this is going to be now the Clinician Founders podcast. It's going to be hosting amazing, fantastic clinicians that have become founders, that run organizations and companies and services that are making a massive difference in the world. The guests are going to be bigger. The conversations are going to be deeper. They're going to be more structured and they're going to be more valuable. So if you haven't subscribed yet, this is the chance for you to hit that subscribe button, the follow button, and make sure that you're tuning into this conversation, because we have people like Simon Fraser from Doctors Training. We're going to have hopefully Jing from Patchwork, the founder of Patchwork. We're going to have Jamie Gross, the founder of Medics in Control. We're going to have some amazing, amazing guests on this podcast, and they're only going to get bigger from there. Right. So, with that, I want to quickly just go through what we've actually done in season one. It's really exciting. I mean, look at this. 29th of January 2025, we started off with a live coaching demo. We had a conversation with Ellie Gray Smith 9 months after she left medicine. And you won't believe what's happened on the back of that conversation. She's now just done her first consulting gig. She's been posting about ADHD on social media. And in our conversation, we were kind of exploring like, oh, does she go into ADHD consulting, ADHD coaching sort of world? And she's now done her first consulting gig. She's going to be on for season two. Well, on the Clinician Founder podcast to talk about that shift or talk about that journey and tell everybody what's been happening, what's been going on. Isn't it exciting? Like the chances of the same person being the guest of the first episode of both seasons. Oh, Ellie, you're special. I'd love to have you on. We then spoke to Mark Pico of Vape Escape, and he's done a fantastic job. So he's now been on TV. He's done some massive fundraising, and he's really got this Vape Escape going. His app's been formed. I think it's being piloted. So he's doing really, really well. So that was episode 2. Episode 3, like I mentioned, was with Stuart Foster talking about monetary. We're hopefully going to be doing a little bit more, perhaps bringing him on to talk about some challenges of building something like monetary. Episode 4 was with Dr. Samyak Dhawan from Kayakalp Global, talking about building a global derm brand. Super interesting conversation. We dove into doing an MBA and the value of an MBA for clinicians as well. So if that's of any interest to you, go to episode 4. We talked about portfolio careers with Dr. Hannah Bruce. She is an absolutely amazing individual who does all sorts of fantastic stuff. She is massive inspiration, an IMG, a GP, a consultant, a fantastic mother, and an amazing human being. Just go and have a listen to her in episode 5. Episode 6, we had the fantastic Rachel Lemon with a lemon wallpaper background, talking to us about the insides of NHS leadership and some things that you probably wouldn't have ever come across. So if you want an interesting gossipy one, that's the episode to go to. Episode 7, we had Dr. Manthan Mehta from India. He was talking about going into industry in pharmacology, management consulting, and what it's like to build an AI startup. And this is where the AI twist starts to come into this podcast as well. Episode 8, we talked to Portia Gibson, who provides private nursing care to patients in the UK post-op. So patients that go for elective procedures, she looks after them. We talked about how it felt to set up that service, some of the challenges around it. For episode 9, we had the fantastic and amazing Dr. Jo Watkins talking about her journey of being a serial entrepreneur. So she went from launching a massive cereal brand in the UK to now launching a community of mother, women, clinician entrepreneurs, like a really niche thing. And she has raving reviews for what she does. And it was an honor to have a conversation with her. And I've, in return, been on Joe's podcast as well. I tried out a couple of solo episodes. I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to that. Drop me a comment and say whether you enjoyed them or not. But we then moved on to episode 10 with Wesley. We talked about pitching. We talked about creating a pitch deck and what it's like to try and get investors for your idea. With episode 11, we spoke to Ola Van Steen, talking about starting a travel business and her journey from being an ICU consultant to running a business and leaving her clinical work behind. Episode 12, we had Dr. Suman Paul, who's a respiratory physician, but does fantastically well on YouTube. So we had him come on and talk about YouTube as a business. So if you've been interested in that, have a listen to episode 12. Episode 13 was Back to AI with Dr. Nada Aberdeen. She has founded AI X Medical, which runs courses and online training for clinicians on artificial intelligence. So that's another really interesting. I think that's one of the most watched episodes, second to Ellie's episode, the first one. And we then went into medical affairs and change leadership with Dr. Abhinav Keshwani on episode 14. Episode 15, we talked to Aman Mehta, once again an IMG, an internal medicine trainee, a member of the clinical entrepreneurship program, and he's big on YouTube as well. So that was a really exciting conversation. Time passed by very quickly on that one. The most unique episode was probably episode 16 with Fazine, where we literally demoed how to create a website from scratch using vibe coding. During the episode, we did a live, we just kind of off the cuff, and it was really interesting experience. So if you're into AI and haven't explored vibe coding yet, you've got to get into that world, because personal hunch is that it's going to be a big deal in the next 2 years. We then went to Ross McKean in episode 17. We talked about building Medizom and how you can save yourself from becoming a medical zombie. And if you're on your fifth night shift, just crawling in and out, trying to figure out what's going on in the world, chances are you might be on that mountain, the Medizom mountain. So have a listen to episode 17, Ross's amazing story. And lastly, we did another fantastic episode about communities and femtech and women in digital health with Dr. Michelle Frank. We had a couple of technical issues on this one, but an amazing conversation nonetheless. So, with that, we've had a couple of guests who couldn't make it. We've had technical errors. We've had varied formats of the podcast, and various foci of the conversation, and all of which has taught me a lot, hopefully has been super valuable. And I want to give you a big thank you for listening along for all of this while, and listening to this podcast and sharing it and showing me your love and support. It really means a lot to me. We're now going to take this into season 2, which is going to be called the Clinician Founder Podcast. So brand's probably going to remain the same. It's just still going to be me. The background's going to look all the same, but the name's going to be the Clinician Founder Podcast, and we're going to have amazing clinician founders. I've already got a list of about 26 of them. I think I'm going to have to break it down into season 2 and season 3. It's a bit ridiculous. I'm just about to send out a bunch of invites. So I'm super excited about this journey. If there's somebody you really want me to interview and have on this podcast, someone whose journey you really want to understand and get to know so that you can emulate it, I want you to drop me a message, find me on LinkedIn, just in the comments, just say who you want on the podcast, and I'll try. And before I leave, I have to say that my YouTube channel is also growing. So go ahead and give me a follow and a subscribe on YouTube. If you search for @coachwithshub, you will find me. I may or may not also be more active on Instagram, so we'll talk about that. But as always, stay curious, keep solving big problems, and know that you've got the power to do something extraordinary. I'll see you in the next one.